Can you hear that? It's not the clang of a blacksmith's forge, and it's not the ring of a miner's pickaxe. That is the sound of a tiny piece of copper, no bigger than a pea, being beaten into history. What if I told you that a single tiny rivet changed the way the entire world dresses? Welcome to the InventIQ. Today, we are telling the story of the engineering of blue jeans, how one tiny rivet changed the world forever. You're wearing them right now, probably. Your parents are wearing them. Your grandparents probably have a favorite pair. But I'm willing to bet you don't know the real story, the gritty, dusty, cutthroat story of how a desperate tailor, a Bavarian businessman, and a handful of copper dots built a global empire. This isn't a fashion story. This is a story about engineering under pressure, about a problem that had plagued humanity for centuries. Every time you bent down, every time you lifted, every time you reached for your pickaxe, rip, your pocket would explode, your pants would fail. And in the lawless, muddy streets of the gold rush, that was a disaster. By the end of this video, you will never look at your own waistband the same way again. You will learn who really created the first jean, the insane obstacles that almost killed the idea, and why a pair of $500 designer jeans owes its entire existence to 19th century miners. Let's pick up the hammer and go back to the beginning. The 17th century, the birth of the blue stuff. Before there was a river of gold in California, there were the fishermen of Genoa, Italy. Picture a rugged dock worker in the 1600s. He wears a coarse, durable cotton fustian. The sailors of Genoa needed a fabric that could survive salt spray, wind, and hard labor. They didn't call it jeans yet, but the French word for Genoa is gens. Across the border, in the city of Nîmes, France, weavers were trying to replicate this mythical fabric. They couldn't get it exactly right, but they accidentally created something tougher. They called it serge de Nîmes, twill from Nîmes. Denim. Two cities, two fabrics, one destined for the history books. But why blue? Why that iconic indigo color? It wasn't for style. It was because indigo was cheap, and more importantly, it aged well. Unlike most dyes that sit on the surface, indigo chemically bonds to the outside of the thread. This means that as you wear it, the blue fades, and the white core of the cotton shows through. The fabric literally molds itself to your body. It gets softer, cooler, and more custom fit with every scratch, wash, and adventure. Imagine living in the 18th century without this, wearing stiff wool that itched and tore. That's exactly how most people felt. So when these heavy fabrics crossed the Atlantic to the New World, they weren't fashion, they were survival gear. 1853, the Iron Man of San Francisco. Fast forward to 1853, the world has gold fever. Thousands of men are flooding into San Francisco, and one of them is a 24-year-old immigrant from Bavaria named Levi Strauss, who later changes his name to the one we know today, Levi. Levi arrives with a shipment of dry goods, but here's the drama. He brought the wrong stuff. He had a massive stock of heavy canvas intended for tents and wagon covers. Oops. In a chaotic port city packed with desperate miners, a failed shipment usually means bankruptcy. But Levi was a hustler. He realized the miners didn't just need shelter, they needed pants. Their trousers were turning to rags in the rough, rocky mine shafts. So Levi took that heavy brown canvas and cut it into trousers. They were ugly, they were stiff, but they were indestructible. The miners went nuts. Levi Strauss & Co. was born. But here's the twist. Levi sold the fabric, he sold the pants, but he didn't invent the metal rivet. He wasn't the tailor. That genius was 2,000 miles away. 1872, the desperate letter from the desert. Now let's talk about Jacob Davis. If you don't know that name, you are about to understand why history is sometimes unfair. Jacob was a tailor living in Reno, Nevada. A Latvian immigrant, he'd tried everything: canal boats, irons, steam engines, begging, borrowing, and piecing together a life. He was married, he had kids, and he was broke. One day, a local woman walks into his cramped shop. Her husband is a laborer working the railroads. She has a specific complaint. Actually, a very specific tear. "Mr. Davis," she says, "I need a pair of pants that won't burst at the pockets when he carries heavy tools." You see, in the 1870s, the world didn't have zippers or stretch fabric. When you filled a pocket with chunks of ore, the seam just exploded. Snap, rip. Then, Jacob Davis had a lightning strike of an idea. He grabbed a handful of copper rivets, the kind used to cinch horse harnesses, and he hammered them through the pocket seams, at the corners of the pockets and the base of the button fly. He didn't just stitch the pants together, he riveted them. An 1873 article in the Pacific Rural Press later said, "Nothing looks more slouchy in a workman than to see his pockets ripped open and hanging down." Jacob Davis just solved that problem forever. Jacob started selling these. They flew off the shelf. But he was terrified. If he didn't patent this, anyone could steal it. Anyone, including his fabric supplier, Levi Strauss. The Patent War and the $69 Gamble. In 1872, Jacob Davis sat down in his dusty Nevada shop and wrote a letter to Levi Strauss in San Francisco. This was a dangerous move. If Levi was greedy, he could just say thanks for the idea and make the pants himself, leaving Jacob with nothing. But Jacob had no choice. The patent fees were $68, roughly $1,500 today. Jacob didn't have that kind of money. He made Levi an offer he couldn't refuse. "You pay for the patent, we do it together, 50-50. Levi, the brilliant businessman, saw the potential instantly. He wrote back, "Yes." On May 20th, 1873, the U.S. Patent Office issued patent number 139121. The title was humble, Improvement in Fastening Pocket Openings. But what they actually invented was the modern blue jean. Levi brought Jacob to San Francisco. He became the production manager, and together they started manufacturing what they called waist overalls. They weren't called jeans yet, and the famous 501 model, that would come later, the XX waist overall. The year of the rivet, 1875 patent reissue. You might think the story ends there, but great engineering is never static. Less than 2 years later, Jacob and Levi realized something. This rivet trick, it wasn't just for pantaloons. It could work on jackets, on shirts, on heavy winter gear. In 1875, they secured a reissue of their patent, RE6335, expanding the claim to other garments. This was strategic genius. By locking down the idea of a riveted seam, they created a fortress around their business. And here's a wild detail from the era. Nobody trusted the rivet at first. Some people thought it would get too hot in the sun and burn their legs. Others worried it would scratch their saddles. Actually, they were right about the scratching. By the 1930s, complaints were so loud, scratching furniture, scratching saddles, that Levi's actually covered the back pocket rivets with denim so they wouldn't scratch. A rare admission that the perfect invention needed a tweak. From workhorse to rebel, the cultural explosion. For 70 years, nobody wore jeans for fashion. If you were Levi's, you were a farmer, a cowboy, a lumberjack, or a miner. They were grimy work pants. Then came the 1930s. The dude ranch craze exploded. Wealthy Easterners, accountants, and bankers would pay to spend a summer out west playing cowboy. Guess what they wore? They bought their first pair of denim waist overalls and brought them back to New York and Boston. The fabric crossed the socio-economic divide. But the real detonation happened in the 1950s. Enter Marlon Brando in The Wild One and James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. These anti-heroes stood there, leaning on a motorcycle, leaning against a wall, wearing blue jeans, white t-shirts, and leather jackets. They weren't asking for permission. Suddenly, blue jeans weren't just durable, they were dangerous. They were freedom. Teenagers, a brand new marketing demographic, bought jeans by the millions just to piss off their parents. Schools banned them. Blue jeans are a symbol of juvenile delinquency. Oh, the irony. The pants invented to help miners dig for gold were now outlawed on school grounds. World War II and the global uniform. Then came the 1940s, World War II. Metal is rationed. Fabric is scarce. The U.S. government tells Levi Strauss to cut costs. That famous crotch rivet? Gone. The back cinch? Gone. Just to save a few grams of steel. But here's the beautiful accident of history. As American GIs shipped out to Europe, Japan, and the Pacific, they wore their jeans off-duty. The locals had never seen anything like it. Durable, casual, cool. The jeans were traded, sold on black markets, and worn with a hunger for American culture. By the 1960s, blue jeans were the uniform of the civil rights movement, worn by activists standing in solidarity with the working poor. By the 1970s, they were high fashion. By the 1990s, they were worn by presidents and rock stars alike. One tiny rivet had circled the globe. The Blue Age, modern impact, and fun facts. So what's the state of the blue jean today? Let me hit you with some facts. Fact 1. The little pocket, that tiny fifth pocket on your jeans, that's not for loose change. It was originally the watch pocket, designed for a pocket watch. In the 1800s, miners needed to protect their watches from smashing against rocks. Fact 2. U.S. consumers buy approximately 450 million pairs of jeans every single year. And on average, you own 7 pairs, right now, sitting in your closet. Fact 3. The oldest known pair of Levi's, they were found in a silver mine in the Mojave Desert in 1948. They date back to the 1880s. An original pair of 501s sold at auction to a Japanese collector for $60,000. Fact 4. Rivets got the celebrity treatment thanks to Bing Crosby? Yes. In the 1950s, a Canadian hotel refused Crosby entry because he was wearing jeans. They were too casual. Levi Strauss & Co. responded by making him a custom denim tuxedo jacket. A denim tuxedo. You can't make this stuff up. Fact 5. Today, engineers are reinventing the rivet for the 21st century. Lasers and ozone gas cameras are replacing harsh sandpaper and chemicals to fade jeans, saving millions of gallons of water. But the mechanics? Still the same. A tiny piece of copper holding the world together. From one man's tiny workshop to your closet. When I first learned this story, I thought it was about pants. But it's not. It's about pressure. The literal pressure of carrying 50 pounds of ore in your pocket. The financial pressure of a broke tailor named Jacob Davis facing a $68 patent fee he couldn't afford. The competitive pressure of the gold rush. Jacob Davis could have just stitched that woman's railroad pants and called it a day. He could have let the pockets blow out and said, "Sorry, that's just the weakness of the fabric." But he didn't. He looked at a simple rivet, a device so old it was used in the Roman Empire. And he asked, what if I moved it from the horse harness to the human waist? And in that single act of creative transfer, he changed civilization. From the anarchists of the 1950s to the Silicon Valley billionaires of today, from the farmhands of the Dust Bowl to the runways of Paris, we are all wrapped in his solution. A solution so perfect, so mechanically sound, that it has remained unchanged for over 150 years. That's not just fashion. That's engineering. So the next time you button up your favorite pair, take a second to look at those copper dots. That is the sound of history. That is the sound of the InventIQ. If you want us to break down the real story behind another piece of tech you take for granted, maybe the zipper, the light bulb, or the smartphone, leave a comment right now. Next, the zipper. Smash that like button if you'll never look at your waistband the same way again. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join the thinking revolution. This is the InventIQ, keeping the world's greatest inventions riveted to your mind.